Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another TechstrongTV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Thursday, April 7th. We are just rolling through the month so far, and it's because we have so many great conversations on TechstrongTV. The month is just flying by so far, and today is no different. We're going to get things kicked off with a great conversation between Alan and Steve Boone, who is the head of product over Checkmarx and certainly no stranger to TechstrongTV. Steve and Alan talk about the launch of the Checkmarx supply chain security solution, which was created to identify some suspicious and potentially malicious open source packages across the modern application development lifecycle. So what the supply chain security solution does is identifies anomalies in the health and security of open source projects, as well as analyzes contributor reputation, and also directly interrogates the behavior of packages via analysis within a detonation chamber. That sounds like the stuff of a spy novel, but it sounds like great technology as well. So Steve and Alan talk about the new technology and what it means for the security landscape. Good stuff there. After that, Alan speaks with Alex Croman, who is the Senior Vice President and Product Engineering General Manager over at New Relic. And they have a new offering as well that they discuss. This is the general availability of New Relic's service level management solution to enable SREs, DevOps, and IT teams and business leaders to define, consume, and iterate on service level indicators and service level objectives with one single click. We all love those single-click solutions, and Alex and Alan talk at length about the technology itself and really how it's kind of changing the game in observability. So good stuff there as well. After that, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Predict 2022 virtual event. This is a conversation between our own Mike Vizard with the Techstrong Group and Digital CXO, and Judith Hurwitz, who is the causality evangelist over at Geminos, and she was formerly with Techstrong Research, and their conversation is titled Do or Die Digital Business Transformation. And so they talk about some of the things on the horizon, even though the worldwide economic growth for 2022, at least as at the time of recording, was projected to grow at 3.9%. Not sure where it is today, but this discussion kind of focuses on what the impact of the pandemic and all of the other things that we've been dealing with on a global scale, what that impact is going to have on digital business transformation. And they also talk about the very real issue of supply chain constraints and disruption. So good, a lot of good takeaways in that presentation. So definitely want to check that one out. After that, I'm back. I've got the news headlines for you. And then I've got a great conversation with Horatio Zambrano, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Secret Double Octopus. And I love that company name. I think it's awesome. Horatio and I talk about the confusion related to what he says is the broad term of passwordless authentication, which is very much a broad term. It actually encompasses a lot of different things, some that are actually not considered passwordless authentication at all, but somehow got kind of glommed into the group. We also talk about some of the key trends and drivers today around passwordless authentication and what organizations can do to achieve what he says is the holy grail and some of the key success criteria for passwordless authentication, real true passwordless authentication. It is a great conversation with a lot of takeaways in it, so I hope you will check that one out as well. After that, I'm back with a webinars preview, and then we have the view. No, we don't. We have Mitch Ashley with his Analyst Corner. In this one, he is speaking with Ben Solomon, who is the product manager over at Cloudflare, which has just released a new API gateway product. So they discuss the gateway's features and its potential impact on application security. Good stuff there as well. And then we wrap things up with The View with Vizard. And in this conversation, Mike Vizard is speaking with Software.com CTO Mason McLeod. Excuse me. He explains why most developers don't spend all that much time actually writing code. A very, very relevant conversation indeed. And it's pretty illuminating as well. So definitely check that one out. All right, that is today's lineup, and we are going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, welcome back, everybody. First up on today's TechstrongTV, we have, who do we have? We have Alan and Steve Boone, who is the head of product over at Checkmarx. They're talking about Checkmarx's new supply chain security solution that helps identify suspicious and potentially malicious open source packages across the application development lifecycle. This is a great technology and certainly one worth checking out, as well as the conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV interview. Really happy to have my friend Steve Boone on for today's interview. Steve's with Checkmarx. Hey Steve, welcome to Techstrong.
Alan, thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, hoping we'll see each other in person soon, maybe RSA or something in June.
I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, definitely.
So will we. Anyway, hey Steve, of course our audience is familiar with Checkmarx. They may not be as familiar with you. Why don't you give, just if you don't mind, a little background on you, your position at Checkmarx, and we might as well throw in a little Checkmarx background too.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm really happy to be here. My background's very much in DevOps, and spent the last 12 years working with a number of different organizations, helping them scale not only best practices in Agile, but DevOps, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and always viewed security as kind of that standalone challenge that people brought in but didn't quite know how to perfectly smooth out and facilitate. And so 2021, I jumped over to Checkmarx, took a role over there as head of product management, really looking on emerging products and emerging technologies. And it's been a fantastic ride. We've got to talk to a number of different organizations and really help them streamline that whole idea of really centralizing security and looking at new advancements and threats and how they can start to prioritize them and attack them and hopefully prevent them.
Absolutely. It's good to have you over there. On that front, Steve, you're here to tell us about some new offering from Checkmarx, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. On the 22nd. Yeah, we just announced it. Super excited. Part of our Checkmarx SCA solution, which, for a lot of organizations, they're leveraging that to give them the basic information about open source, right? What are my vulnerabilities? What are my licensing implications? What are my known vulnerabilities? Fairly common market stuff that you expect to get out of an SCA tool. With this, we've added our capabilities for identifying supply chain vulnerabilities. And so this, is a huge step forward in what we believe will be a bit of a shift in how companies look at and think about open source. Traditionally, we've seen companies kind of have a tolerance for known risk, right? I can look at my list of vulnerabilities and say, hey, these are high, these are medium, these are low. I want to focus on the high, right? These other ones, they might not be exploitable. We're not that concerned. But what we've seen now, especially over the last couple of months, even going back as far as October, November 2021, is this huge rise in not vulnerable package, but outright malicious packages, things that are designed to come in and exploit and do harm to your business, to your partners. And what we've been focusing on is how can we identify what a malicious package is, why is it malicious, what are the things that make it malicious, and then inform developers to educate them on how they can identify these packages to keep them out of their organization. So that's been kind of the premise of what we've been driving towards. We released a number of really cool open source projects that are out there. You can go out to github.com/checkmarks. And we've got 3 different projects out there that range from us being capable of monitoring open source packages. So we'll look for abnormal commitments, things that don't seem right compared to the history of that project. And we can alert developers on those. We can also alert the package maintainers. And we've got a lot of cool stuff out there for dependency confusion, as well as account takeovers for open source packages.
Love it. Hey, just, I got to do what I got to do. SCA, software composition analysis.
Yeah.
For those in the audience who are not familiar. And of course, software composition analysis is kind of the term of art, or name given to the open source scanning and these open source tools, scanning tools. In addition to showing vulnerabilities, old versions of open source components, also figure in with licensing as well. Steve, there are a few subjects as hot in security right now as software supply chain. S-bombs and all of this kind of stuff, right? Everything from the White House on down is involved in it. I can't help but imagine, well, here's my take on it for whatever it's worth, right? I think we're very early in the defining phase of exactly what supply chain security, software supply chain security is going to eventually look like. I think we're probably going to see some best practices emerge, right? We're going to see maybe some legislation, or, there's going to be a compliance thing going on here.
100%, right? And what we're starting to see in the market, there's actually a Google-backed project called SLSA, SLSA. It stands for Supply Chain Levels for Software Artifacts. I think I got that right. And it's kind of a mouthful. But what's really cool about the project is that it's backed by a bunch of very large companies, and they're vendor agnostic, right? So you don't got folks like me coming in there telling you, hey, it's going to be how it's done. It's actually large companies coming together and saying, look, here's what we're concerned about from a supply chain perspective. And these are the things we want to see the market help us with. And to me, that's the best way to start seeing the best practices and having companies push vendors to build things that are actually going to address what they feel the real needs are. And the SLSA framework is great because it outlines really 4 areas of concern for businesses. They talk about the source code, they talk about your CI/CD servers, and they talk about where we're actually storing our artifacts, our package repositories. Now, and the 4th one is dependencies. So out of those, and they've got a really cool chart. If you get a chance to check it out on their website. But 3 of those are really protected today by a lot of the controls that you have with your CISO, right? So, being able to attack your source code or your CI/CD server or your package repository, a malicious actor has to do quite a bit to access those systems already. They got to get into your network. They got to get around firewalls. There's a bunch of hurdles there. But the biggest challenge that we see and what we're hearing from the industry is the challenge around dependencies and open source artifacts that we're willingly pulling into organizations. There's this challenge of we want to give developers the ability to be innovative, not reinvent the wheel, and so obviously embrace open source. And we used to have this mindset of just as long as you're using respectable, trusted packages, you're fine, right? As long as everyone's using it, what's the worst that can happen? But what we're seeing now is those are the packages that are 100% being targeted because they have such a wide footprint, right? And so it's no longer enough to just say, well, you know what, by default, everyone embraces it, so we can embrace it too. We have to be much more vigilant about that. So our solution's really designed to help companies address this open source third-party dependency challenge. That's kind of our first segue. And over the course of 2022, we'll continue to offer functionality that will address the rest of the SALSA framework. So looking at source code, CI/CD service, specifically the plugins that people are pulling into like their Jenkins instances, those can have malicious code as well. So we've got to understand kind of, how those things operate.
I think that also brings you into API security, because a lot of those plugins are kicking off other third-party tools, applications, and via API, and that's a whole area here. It's not necessarily software supply chain, but it's how this chain is all talking to each other, how it's all working. Steve, there's another organization that we've been covering on this subject, and that's the Linux Foundation's OSSF, right? Open Source Security Foundation. I believe they're also coming out with some, guidelines for software supply chain security.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see a lot of that too. We've got to your point, the executive order that came out around SBOMs. Everyone's trying to put together a thing of like, what are our best practices? And it's all good. It's all good for organizations. It's all good for understanding, how we can improve as an industry. What I would like to see, and what I'm kind of pushing people for is how do we get proactive instead of reactive in our solutions? The SBOM's great. But it's very reactive. When we think about things like Log4j and all of the challenges we had around Log4Shell, if you had an SBOM, would it have reduced the amount of time it would have taken you to identify your applications and what they have? Sure, absolutely, right? But to that degree, what do you do when you're managing 700 SBOMs in your organization, right? Like, what are you supposed to do with that? So these types of solutions, while valuable, are a little bit like a Band-Aid. They create more challenges too. And so we're really focused on trying to provide proactive solutions, things that you and your development team can pull down and start using today in your organization, zero friction to start basically, being the eyes and ears for your developers. One of the cool things we have out there is an open source project called Chain Alert. And if you've ever done any international travel, which Alan, I know you have, you go and you swipe that credit card and the next thing you know, your phone's buzzing telling you, hey, are you sure this is you making this purchase? It's the exact same kind of value we want to have for developers on open source is as we're monitoring those code contributions for anomalies. We're actually reaching out to the developers and the package owners and saying, hey, is this legit? Did you expect this to happen? We're seeing new versions of this package without any new code commits. Seems kind of suspicious. We haven't seen that before. Right? We're looking at how long these maintainers have contributed to the projects. And so we're gathering some good data that I think is above and beyond what the normal industry will call health and wellness, right? Everyone will give you some metrics about like how safe is this package. We're actually studying the contributions and we're using behavioral analysis to actually inspect the code. So we pull it into our own sandbox. We like to call it a detonation chamber. But the idea being is when we look at that code, we're running static analysis on it. We're running dynamic analysis on it. We're really treating it like you would your own proprietary code to know how it works. Is it listening on your network for other servers that it's going to communicate to? Is it trying to phone home or send a signal that, hey, I'm online, just letting somebody know? All of those things raise red flags in today's environment.
Got it. Love it. Steve, it's great stuff. You know what? Let's talk a little bit about, so I think this came out the 22nd, you said, so it's out already. How do people engage? They want to see it, play with it, check it out.
Yeah, reach out to us on checkmarx.com. You can request a demo. You can request a trial. We'll be happy to get you guys set up. You can access it today on our SCA product. That's where it's available for our existing SCA customers. We just gotta flip the switches for you, right? Make sure that you're jamming with it. So it's here, and your easiest way is just to reach out to us to get started.
Sounds great, man. So this is available to existing SCA software composition analysis customers today. No extra charge or anything like that?
No extra charge on it today. Yeah, as we look at the whole market, and this is a need, and part of what we're trying to do here is drive our adoption, and differentiate our capabilities from the rest of the market. So right now, this isn't something that we're trying to go out and nickel and dime people on. We've had these open source projects out for a while. The reality is this is a crisis moment. The number of malicious packages that we're seeing is extraordinary. Part of what we're able to do is when we identify a malicious package, we're feeding that what I'll call, it's almost like a thumbprint, right? We understand which part of that package is malicious or we feel is malicious, and we start looking at that pattern of code in other open source projects. And then we start to find them. It's kind of this continuous improvement for our machine learning engines to grow this. And the number that we're finding it's scary. And so, we feel like it's the right thing to do, is to make these, the core of the ability to adopt and protect available developers. That's why I was talking about the open source initiatives earlier. And then absolutely, we folded it back into our main engines, and we'll continue to advance and scale those going forward.
Love it. It's great, Steve. I really feel, as I said earlier, I think we're going to see regulation come in here. We're going to see we're probably in emerging practices now. We'll see those kind of evolve into best practices.
Yep.
But, I'm glad to see Checkmarks out ahead on this. It sounds like you really kind of push the envelope here in what people need, for software supply chain.
We've been saying internally for a while, and back in August 2021, we acquired a company called Dustico, and they had a great motto. They said, "We don't take code from strangers." And at the time, we thought, man, that's something to wrap your head around, right? In the world of open source, how do you not take code from strangers? And so that's our mission. That's what we're kind of adhering to, and that's what keeps us all kind of rushing into the office, because it does feel like a crazy mountain to go climb. But we've been chipping away at it. We've made great progress. And I think, like I said, this is just the first step for us.
Excellent, man. Hey, Steve, I appreciate you coming on. Lots of luck there with Checkmarks. Don't be a stranger. Come back and keep us posted, man.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you at RSA, my friend.
Yeah, you bet. Steve Boone, Checkmarks here. Go check out. It's part of their SCA offering, but it's specifically for software supply chain security. Check it out. Bye-bye, Steve. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. We're going to take a break here on TechstrongTV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, Alan is speaking with Alex Croman, who is the Senior Vice President and Product Engineering General Manager over at New Relic. New Relic has a new service level management solution that helps empower IT teams as well as SREs, DevOps, and business leaders to identify and consume and iterate service level indicators and service level objectives with one single click of a mouse button. Good stuff there. Great technology. And it's a great conversation as well. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another TechstrongTV interview. My guest this interview, he's a first-time guest here on TechstrongTV. Let's give him a nice welcome. It's Alex Croman from New Relic. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Hey, Alan. How's it going? Nice to be here.
Very well. So, Alex, as I mentioned, this is your first time on here at Techstrong, so welcome. Of course, we've had a long history of having folks from New Relic on here, and our audience needs no introduction really to New Relic. I think everyone in in the DevOps and CI/CD world and observability and this whole digital transformation kind of space knows New Relic. But Alex, let's start with you. What's your position at New Relic, and maybe a bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm the general manager of our observability group at New Relic. So I work on a lot of our observability tools that we offer to customers. I've been at New Relic a long time, 10 years.
Wow.
Before that, head of engineering at New Relic. So really deep engineering background, software developer before that. So have spent a lot of time leading engineering teams. And at New Relic, we talk about our mission being to help every engineer do their best work based on data and not opinions. And that's just a mission I'm really excited about. Like, I really want to make sure that every engineering team is informed with as much data as possible so they can make the best decisions for their customers.
Excellent. That's great. What else is great is in today's world, we talk about the Great Resignation and this and that. To have someone who's actually been in a company for 10 years, who that tribal knowledge is kind of seeps in by osmosis and also seeps out that's a treasure to have in an organization. Too many organizations today, whether it be leadership down to the bottom, they're there 6 months, a year, and quite frankly, you could tell, right? A lot of that tribal knowledge is just not kept as well. So congratulations to you for 10 years there.
Yeah, it's been a great ride. It's been, every year it's a new year. There's like so many things we've worked on over that time. It's just been an incredible journey.
I'm just thinking back. This past month, we celebrated, I think, 8 years of launching DevOps.com. And so you were there 2 years before that. That's just, that's really good. Good for you. Congratulations. So, now you're in this SVP role of the observability, which, look, there are a few areas hotter these days than observability, right? Everybody's talking about observability and how important it is and why you need it. And it's sort of subsumed so many areas, what we used to call ALM, APM, AI ops, the log management kind of stuff and all of that. It's all kind of taken its place, or it's all kind of fit into this whole concept of observability. You guys, New Relic, I remember interviewing, it's got to be 9 months ago, 12 months ago, where you kind of embraced observability, right? With the New Relic heritage of years and years of gathering data and insight. When did you become the SVP of the group here like this?
About 2 years ago. And yeah, I can talk a little bit about what that journey has looked like for us. As you and your viewers know, New Relic started off as an APM company. Yep. And over the years, over the last 12 years, we rounded out that we rounded out that offering with a lot of different innovation and point solutions for infrastructure and mobile, browser, synthetics, kind of all of these other products. But a few years ago, we started realizing that our customers really needed everything to be completely integrated into a single platform. And we didn't have that integration done as well as we'd like. And so, 2 years ago, we released the New Relic platform that just brought all of our different products into the same user experience, into the same UI, as well as the same data platform. And that's been a really great change for us. I think, we hear like a lot of customers, a lot of engineers that we talk to, when they are trying to monitor their system and just answer the question, like, is this thing working the way we want it to, they're often going to 10, 11, 12 different tools to do that, like across, and when you're doing that, it's really hard to get an understanding of how just your own systems is working. But if you're working in a distributed environment with different teams and you're depending on, dozens of different services that maybe, some of those services, other people in your organization have written, there's some of the services maybe a cloud provider has written. And if you don't have standard common instrumentation across those, you can't really understand how your distributed system is working. So, I think what we've done, taking the 400 or 500 different telemetry types that we support, putting them all into the same, data storage system, which we call NRDB, and then allowing customers to just look at all of that data across all of the different products has been really important. And we launched that platform 2 years ago, and it's just gotten a great response from our customers.
Absolutely. Well, it's just, as I mentioned earlier, it's probably one of the hottest things out there right now. But you guys have a major announcement coming out. Right. Well, actually, by the time people see this, it'll be out already. Some new functionality, new offering. If you don't mind, Alex, let's share with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. On April 5th, we are announcing the general availability of our new service levels capability. And I think it's a really exciting launch. We've been in early access with this capability for several months now. We've already have 1,500 customers using it. So we've gotten a lot of good feedback on it already, but let me take a step back and talk a little bit more about it. So, in my prior role as an engineering leader, one of the most difficult things to do was to get everybody on the same page about reliability and system performance. Teams would have different measures for that. Like there wouldn't be unified dashboards for everything. Teams would maybe disagree about performance, or there'd be, and what we've learned, what I've learned, and I know what our customers have learned, is that the way to get everyone on the same page about reliability and performance is through the use of service levels. You can set service level objectives that have, all of the objectives that you're trying to hit with your service. And if they're common across all the different teams, so common language, common measurement, common timeframes, then as a, business leader or as a engineering leader, you can have a common look at how performance and reliability is happening across the organization. And then you can use that to really help manage trade-offs between, technical debt, roadmap features, and just really have a rich conversation on the team around, how you can improve reliability and performance. And so, what we are launching is a way for both engineering teams as well as product and business leaders to manage service levels. They will be able to define service levels however they'd like. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time working on and thinking about is making them as easy as possible to set up. One of the pieces of feedback that we've heard as other engineering and SRE leaders have gone on this journey to try to create service levels is that it's really hard to create them and to figure out like what's exactly the right metrics, what's the right timeframes, what's the right objectives to be setting. And so what we've been able to introduce is just a one-click setup for a service level. So you can go into New Relic, click a button, and it's going to use our AI ops capabilities to baseline your levels and set good guidelines for what we think is at least a good first pass for your service levels. And that's just like a really great, easy way to get teams using those. And that's been a really popular feature. But if you want more advanced service levels, you can do that as well. So we have a really flexible data storage system and query system called NRDB, which stands for the New Relic database. And you can compose service levels using the query language. So any kind of subset of the telemetry data that we're collecting, you can create service levels on. It's not just limited to, some like simple service levels like, latency and errors on a single service. So we definitely spent a lot of time on making the one-click setup easy, as well as the advanced query capabilities. And I think even like some of the things that we're even seeing some of the early customers doing is actually setting service levels on key business metrics. Not just maybe performance or error rate on a single service, but on success rates on checkouts or conversions and things like that, and alerting when business metrics like that are falling behind. So lots of power behind the feature, and we're really excited about it.
I love it, Alex. So we do a bunch of video shows. One of the shows is the SRE show, and we spend a lot of time on the SRE show talking about the difference between SLAs and SLOs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It seems to me what you guys are doing here really would lend itself well to SLOs. I mean, SLAs, it's not like we're suing someone if they didn't, a certain level wasn't reached. But it seems like a really, in the age where SREs, I said how hot observability is, SREs are pretty hot too, right? That's a really hot part of the market. It seems like this is a great SRE kind of feature set, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, definitely, we were thinking a lot about the SREs when creating this. And typically what we've seen, and adoption of a feature like this, I think, is different depending on the company. But I think, the most common adoption pattern I've seen is that, SREs are really driving the creation of SLAs and SLOs. SLAs are more of the business agreements, but you need to have a lot of SLOs in place to make sure that you're hitting those business agreements. And then it's difficult for them to get those in place because there's not an easy system to track them. They're hard to set up. But with New Relic service levels, the SREs can kind of go to the engineering team, and they can do the one-click process, or they can kind of walk those teams through how to create them. And then what we found is once that they're able to basically make it self-sustaining. So after maybe the first kind of conversations with the SREs and the engineering teams happen, the engineering teams just take it and they start iterating on the SLOs, and it becomes really part of an organization's culture. And I very much believe that that SLOs should not just be limited to should not just be something that an SRE team is driving, but every engineering team needs to have SLOs on as many things as they can, and be managing to them and thinking about them on a daily basis. And going back to that mission of New Relic around making sure engineering is data driven and not opinion driven. I think service levels are the objective way to be able to really manage your team and make sure that it's having an impact. If you don't have them set up, it's just sort of opinions around, is the thing fast enough? Is it reliable enough? But when you actually have the rich conversation around what exactly is fast enough, or what exactly is reliable enough, I think you can really up level the engineering team and have just much richer trade-off conversations.
Agreed. I love it. And this, as I mentioned, by the time people are watching this, it'll be out, commercially available.
Mm-hmm. Right.
is it like part of the existing New Relic offering? Is this an additional charge?
No, it's part of it's part of New Relic. So if you are paying for a seat of New Relic, you'll have access to it and you can start using it immediately.
Love it. Hey, Alex, this sounds like a great new addition to an already kind of full featured product. So good work, man. It'll be interesting to see how the market scarfs it up, because they're always looking for stuff like this. Keep up the great work. Come back and keep us posted.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
All right. You know what, Alex? We didn't tell people obviously newrelic.com, right? NEWRELIC.com. And I imagine off the front page, you'll be able to get news on this.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, man. Be well. We're going to take a break here on TechstrongTV. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up is Predict 2020. This is our Something Old, not Predict 2020, Predict 2022, our Something Old segment. This is a conversation between Mike Vizard, our own Mike Vizard, who is with TechStrong Group and Digital CXO, and Judith Hurwitz, who is the causality evangelist at Geminos and formerly with TechStrong Research. Their presentation is titled Do or Die Digital Business Transformations, taking a look at the global economy and some of the things that may inhibit growth in the worldwide economic growth for 2022, such as supply chain issues, critical skills shortages, and the like. It is a really fascinating conversation and definitely one you want to check out. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Transformation Do or Die in 2022 presentation. I'm Mike Vizard, Chief Content Officer for TechStrong Group, and I'm with Judith Hurwitz, who's President of TechStrong Research, and we're going to walk you through what to expect in the coming year as we all move past COVID, hopefully, and reinvent just about every process we can imagine. Let's look at the economic outlook first. The Conference Board is predicting that we'll see economic growth in the range of about 3.9%. That may be a little optimistic. We have a lot of issues out there to deal with, including the supply chain is still somewhat constrained. It's hard to find people because of the Great Resignation, and there's lots of pressure on inflation side. So the question then becomes, Judith, do you think that the economy is going to lend itself to major investments in IT, and what impact does the economy actually have on those IT investments these days?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I do think that there's going to be a lot of investment in IT because, with, as you say, the Great Resignation and some of the COVID issues and supply chain issues, I think that increasingly businesses are going to rely on next generation of IT services, including AI in data, business process management. And you can already see that a lot of businesses, if a customer calls up and has an issue or a problem, they are being sent to a virtual agent, which is okay if you have a simple issue or simple question. But right now, I think it's all or nothing. And I believe that IT organizations are going to start investing in using AI and data technology and improvements in business process management in order to improve the customer experience. Because right now, I think they've gone so far to the automation perspective and persona that they're missing out on the opportunities to really engage with customers. So I see that as one of the biggest issues in 2022 is automation is fine, but you have to find genuine ways to engage with your customers based on business process.
When I was much younger, the IT budget was kind of dictated as a percentage of revenue. It was usually in the 2 to 3% of total revenue that an organization generated. And I wonder if that metric or that method of thinking about IT spending is kind of become antiquated, because so much of what we're going to do going forward is dependent upon IT. So do I need to rethink how I budget for IT?
Yeah, I do think budgeting has already changed. You don't hear IT as a percentage of revenue anymore. Now what you're really looking at is, I need IT to be sophisticated, to be able to transform my business, because in fact, and I think it's becoming a cliche at this point, but software is driving business innovation. And if you don't do it well, and if you don't invest in, and if you don't invest in things like AI and automation and API security, things like that, your company will be in big trouble. So it's not, I think those metrics applied when we viewed IT as this backroom function, and it's now front and center.
And that IT budget, is it really tied up in a centralized IT organization? Or it seems to me every line of business now has its own little IT team, and then there's a centralized team. And how do those two things come together? Because frequently I feel like they're at odds with each other.
So I think we, for the last, I say 4 to 5 years, we've been in an era where the developer is king or queen, and the developer dictates what technology is going to be used. And, it always happens within this market that it goes back and forth. So I think we're about to open an era where there's a lot more centralization of key factors. And yes, developers can use tools, but there's sort of a framework where you have to integrate those tools into a broader set of capabilities that help to make transformation a reality.
I think you're spot on, because last time I checked, it was almost impossible to drive any meaningful digital process transformation that didn't touch multiple departments. So the idea that somehow a marketing department can go drive something without engaging the supply chains or the sales department seems counterproductive. So do you think that this whole shift is going to force everybody back to the table, as it were? I
do. I remember a conversation maybe 7 or 8 years ago where the marketing department would find the latest shiny object tool to do something related to marketing, and they would have the clout with the C team to say, we want this tool and you need to buy it for us, even though IT leaders, the CXO team, would look at that and said, oh my God, this is not good. This is not secure. It's difficult to manage. There are a lot of issues here. No, we want this, and we need to buy it. They buy it, and then everything that the CXO team predicted has come true, and there are a lot of issues, and some of it became shelfware, and it probably is still on the shelf collecting dust.
All right. So let's look a little bit further about the changing IT landscape, because Gartner is forecasting that we'll see IT spending continue to increase in the 5.5% range and even higher around the rest of the globe. But what was interesting to me is they had a little note in their presentation that said, hey, a lot of these transformations are going to involve custom code and asynchronous workflows and a lot of work on behalf of developers. And we've been having this conversation in one form or another about build versus buy as long as I can remember. The SAPs and the Oracles of the world will argue that I need to take a standard process that's already embedded inside of my suite and kind of standardize on that, and that might work for certain processes. And then there's other ones that feel like maybe they are really differentiated value, and that's the thing that the organization is really going to focus on. So my question to you is, do you think that IT organizations and the people that work for that matter have a good sense of when to lean on, say, a suite versus build a custom thing, or do people just kind of go with whatever they're more comfortable with at the moment?
So I think for many years, the idea of buying packaged software was the answer to everything. And what I have observed is, there were great streamlined offerings, packaged offerings that made it very easy to optimize and to change based on changing business processes. But what I saw companies doing is adding more and more complexity to these offerings so that it was no longer that streamlined environment. They wanted you to buy more and more options and capabilities that you add on to the base platform. And I think we've reached the era where some of these platforms are so heavy and so complicated that it, in a sense, they become unusable. And I think one of the problems is it takes us away from understanding the customer experience, understanding changes in business processes. So I think that we're in a really interesting transition where companies are going to have to rethink this. What's most important? I think it's culture. I think it's the right tools for the right job and keeping things a lot simpler so things can be changed quickly and efficiently. And I actually think that one of the key issues with digital transformation and why there's so many, articles and complaints about, gee, we started this digital transformation, it's not working so well, is because there's a lot of cultural issues. How do people work together? How do they collaborate across departments or business units or subsidiaries? And until you figure that out and get people working in collaboration, you can talk digital transformation until you're blue in the face and it's not going to work.
I think one of the more interesting trends around the packaged application has been this shift to a SaaS application model, but all those SaaS applications come with low-code tools, or you can go buy a third-party low-code tool and do whatever you want to do with it in terms of customizing that environment. And you see people starting to create workflows that span multiple SaaS platforms. The question I have about culture is, do you think that that's always going to require, say, a professional developer, or will we actually see this rise of the so-called citizen developer and people who have some business expertise who can generate and write some code, and we won't always be dependent upon a quote-unquote professional developer?
So I think the answer is yes and no, of course. and the reason I say that is because if you're going to have a low-code environment, which obviously is there and people are using it, you have to have a framework and an infrastructure. So if somebody says, I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to create this exciting new thing, what if it breaks things? What if it brings in the wrong data? What if it creates a crazy business process that sends things into a tailspin? So yes, you can use low code, but it has to be done in a way that protects the business. I think the other issue that companies have been grappling with for decades is how do you start to customize an environment, whether it's a SaaS application or even a traditional ERP system, which then locks you in so tightly to that environment when something new and something better comes along, it's not so easy to make a change. So there's been, this is not a new debate, but I think, SaaS applications, allow you to write a lot of custom code. And one of the impacts is you are locked in for a long time.
Yeah, and one of the challenges with business users creating applications is they're not application designers, so chances are that the application is going to be ugly is high. Chances are that it won't scale in the enterprise is even higher, and the chances are that it's going to be insecure or astronomical because they don't know anything about security.
Well, and that's why you can't just say, oh, this is a low-code environment, go have fun. You have to set up rules. How do you, security should be built in to that environment. So you don't go, oh, I'm going to open this API and anybody can come in. So it's got to be done in a way, do those workflows, but there has to be gates and there has to be requirements and something where you try to do something that is really strange. It says, stop, you can't do that. You're opening up a security hole in that data, and it won't let you do it. So, low code is fine as long as it's well defined.
I think we have to have a platform that protects us from ourselves.
Oh, yes, I agree.
But let's look at where we are right now in terms of digital transformation, because I think there's a massive disconnect in the world. We see these studies talking about where business owners and the managing directors all think that they're doing great. They launched all these initiatives right after the COVID pandemic, and they kind of ran it from the top down. There was more like an edict. And yet, when you go look at some of these studies, the department heads and the managers don't share the same perception at all. Things are not going nearly as well. Depending on where they are, they might be as 5 months behind. They may be even further behind. And people are trying to figure out, hey, how do I prioritize which ones are going forward? Maybe I also need to figure out which ones to kill or bring out your digital business process dead. What's your sense of what's the real relationship these days between the business and IT and their understanding of what can be done and how far along they might actually be?
Well, this is where that culture issue comes in. So you may have, the top management team bought into this. They're excited. We're going to transform everything. But unless the whole organization has a roadmap and understands what their job is and how this will help the business, if you just have a few people at the top all excited, but people, 3 rungs down in the organization that actually have to do the work say, I don't know what the hell these guys are doing. This is bunk. I don't get it. I'm just going to keep coding in COBOL because that's what I love. I'm just making a joke. I don't code in COBOL anymore. but so if you don't get the message down to the whole organization from the top management to the people doing coding and to the people who are dealing with customers, if everyone isn't on board and understands what you're doing and what the impact and how it will make everyone's life better, it won't work. So it's not a matter of, did I pick the right digital transformation strategy? I had McKinsey come in and they gave me this and we're all excited, but nobody beyond that team working with McKinsey knows what the hell this is all about. It's not going to work.
I think the temptation is that you get frustrated with IT and you're like, we'll just create this little special project team over here and we'll end run the whole issue and we'll all magically shift. The issue then becomes, you wind up creating a duplicate of an existing process, and it turns out that all your revenue is tied to the legacy process. So
Yeah.
I remember watching a keynote at AWS where one of the presenters was from Western Union, and she said the right approach is to embrace the mess and basically get in there and start saying, okay, well, what can we put an API in front of that makes it more accessible? And then what do we need to build that's new? But the idea that you were just going to wholesale replace everything seems almost unrealistic. But yet you talk to some folks and that's what they're trying to do. Do you think that those folks may wind up failing more often than they succeed?
Yeah, I don't think you can take that approach. I think there's a lot of valuable IP within existing systems, whether it's data, whether it's business processes. You have to be very careful with processes, because if it's a process that manages, and let's say it's an insurance company that sells annuities, and you have a system that understands the data and has business processes in place for cutting, checks for customers, and you say, well, let's just redo that, and there's some rules in there that if you mess with them, you're going to get in huge trouble. So I think that you have to be careful. You have to look at the whole environment. A great example of this is with AI. So I actually heard this story from an IT leader who was talking about how the company decided they were going to go all in on AI, and they hired 5 computer scientists, AI data scientists, put them in a room, whatever you need. 6 months later, they said, okay, so is the system done? And the response was, well, we've been working on this, and we have picked a model and a language that we want to use. They were not talking to the business about what the needs were, what business problems they were solving. They didn't include people that understood the existing data in the organization. They didn't talk to people who understood business process and the customer experience. And unless you have, what we like to call a hybrid team that includes everybody that are the key stakeholders, for the business, focus on customer success, they'll fail.
Do you think IT leaders should maybe make a extra effort to insert themselves into that conversation, especially if they know that the company is kind of on its way to crazy train city?
I think IT leaders have to be leaders. I think one of the transitions I see is, it used to be a few years ago, and maybe currently with a lot of IT leaders, we're business leaders. We really understand our business, which they have to, but they also have to understand the changes in IT services, what's available, what works, what doesn't. They really have to understand the technology. Otherwise, some person says, I found this shiny new object. It's the best thing since sliced bread, and we're gonna make our entire environment a metaverse, and everything will be perfect. Now, if the IT leader doesn't understand what that is, and doesn't want to appear stupid in front of this 25-year-old technology genius, then they're going to make mistakes, and that's happened time and time again. A true IT leader has to have deep understanding of the business and a deep understanding of technology, and not get snowed.
All right. And if nobody's listening to you, maybe you are in the wrong spot, and you should start looking for some place that will. All right. The other big issue of the day, though, is simply skills. It seems to me, at least, every survey that I look at points to skills as being the biggest barrier. At least a quarter of the folks who took a Red Hat survey said the same. They also pointed to things like technical debt and legacy platforms and all the things that we've been talking about before. Where do I find the skills to drive these processes? Because a lot of my guys are basically spending all their time trying to hold up what I got as it is. It's all baling wire and tape as it is. So how do I kind of make the pivot and get the right people with the right skills in the right place?
Well, I think there are a couple things. One is when you're trying to move in a new direction, don't start off with a massive project. Set up a team that you can sort of isolate from the day-to-day tasks and let them work together to come up with solutions. The other thing is we talk about IT skills, but there are a lot of people with coming out of technical schools, coming out of junior colleges and community colleges, and they are willing and eager to be trained. So, there's a whole group of people out there who aren't, coming up the IT ladder, and I think we have to invest in people who are in different professions, different directions, because it can work. I think it, and I just think there are no magic bullets here. There are no easy solutions. If you just apply this pixie dust, everything will be perfect. You have to deal with the legacy systems. You have to really understand your data and work with it. You have to understand what your business processes are and how they're locked in and how you can open them up. So, I don't think there are easy answers. I think there's a lot that can be done, but when you're dealing with systems and technology that's been in place for, maybe 30, even 50 years, and you've neglected it. It's like if you have a home that you built that was built 50 years ago and nobody has done any maintenance on it, and then you say, okay, now it's time to update my house, but everything is crumbling around you. You can't just do a new coat of paint or say let's add new curtains or a new kitchen if the underlying infrastructure is falling apart.
I think if you're running IT these days and you're counting on the HR department to help you find talent and staff your squad, that you're going to have a bad ending. We see it all the time, right? There's all these jobs that are listed out there that aren't going fulfilled. The wrong candidate never seems to be called out, and so a lot of guys wind up interviewing people who are the wrong people for the job in the first place, and then they can't find the right people because they don't really manage. At least the IT leader doesn't think like a general manager of a sports franchise where you are kind of thinking about talent management all the time.
Right.
You have a little farm system that you create. You're working with the local colleges. And you are pulling people out who may not have a traditional background, and you're getting them into your organization and kind of bringing them along. So do you think the way that IT people think about managing personnel just needs to change?
I do. I think, when I was talking about community colleges, that's exactly, if you say, okay, I want somebody with, 10 years of Python development experience, and they have to know these frameworks and they have to be an expert on API management and security, you're going to have a hard time finding them. So I think, having this, I love the idea of a farm team where you bring people, people have a career path. Yes, you don't know everything, but we'll teach you this much. And then they become experts on that. And then then you grow them and you train them and you allow them to become, experts. I mean, in the beginning of the IT environment, you didn't, most of the people who who became developers and programmers and even IT architects, they didn't have degrees in IT. They had never, touched a computer before, but the industry trained them, and their colleagues trained them, and that was the norm. And I think we have to get back to that.
Yeah, I always like those ads where they're looking for people with 10 years of Kubernetes experience for a platform that hasn't been around yet for 5. So that's always
Right.
amazing to me.
Yeah, I remember seeing some ads for people in AI for large companies, and they would list, all of the qualifications that they needed, and they were paying high salaries, but if you had that experience, you had God status. And of course they could never, even when they were offering, salaries of like, this is $2 million salary, even at that, they couldn't find people with all of those capabilities, including 10 years of Kubernetes experience.
All right. Well, Winston Churchill once noted that you should never let a good crisis go to waste. And I feel like we have a lot of crises going on all the time, and COVID-19 is only the latest in the series, and there'll probably be more. So maybe the way to think about this is, rather than being conservative, where a lot of IT people I talk to, their primary thing is stability and making things work all the time. But maybe it's okay if things break from time to time, because it creates that moment or that event where people are willing to change. And I feel like our conversation as we go forward is really all about change management at the end of the day and how to do it. So is that where we're at this point?
I think you're making a really important point. I don't remember who said it, but I always remember somebody who said you should cherish your bottlenecks, because if everyone seems to be working just fine, you don't pay attention to the problems. If you focus on where are the bottlenecks, where are the problems, then you're going to be a lot better off changing for the future.
I feel at least, though, that we are at some pivotal moment where if I don't get my act together this year, I might be consigned to the scrap heap of history, as they say. Do you think that people have time, or is there a sense of urgency going into 2022 that we really need to get in front?
I think there's definitely a sense of urgency. How we manage our data, how we manage our business processes, how we learn to develop in a way that is flexible and modular, how we use the cloud as the industrial cloud as opposed to let's go build something and who cares what it looks like. So there is a sense of urgency. We need to do that if we're going to make it.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. We're going to take some questions and answers now and move on.
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at the missing link in continuous DevOps cycles. Delivering software quickly, reliably, and safely is at the heart of technology transformation and organizational performance, regardless of industry. As part of overall technology transformation, many companies are recognizing the benefits of applying DevOps methodologies to areas outside of software development, such as general product development, IT expansion and scaling, and new business processes. However, some organizations and even software development teams may be missing a crucial step in the product development lifecycle. This article looks at the more common elements of DevOps methodologies, namely continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous release, and offers up another continuous process that many organizations are simply overlooking or haven't considered as a way to round out their DevOps lifecycle and better understand what they're building and for whom. Good one. And we take another look at how organizations can get started using low-code or no-code tools. Non-technical users can use low-code, no-code tools to build many types of applications, which then can be integrated with other software systems. By learning low-code, no-code development, users are able to create software for themselves or for their business much faster than if they learned how to code the traditional way. This article covers why no-code development, low-code development is worth learning and features some great learning resources and communities folks can join to get started with low-code and no-code development. All right, in news, WhiteSource has launched a free command line interface tool that detects vulnerable open source Spring4Shell vulnerabilities that are impacting Java applications built using the Spring development framework. The WhiteSource Spring4Shell Detect tool is similar to the tool the company made available earlier this year to detect Log4Shell vulnerabilities in Java applications. It provides an exact path to direct and indirect dependencies, along with how to find a fixed version of the Spring framework to accelerate remediation efforts. Spring4Shell is yet another zero-day vulnerability that has been given a 9.8 severity score. As a result, DevOps and cybersecurity teams are now racing to update applications impacted by this vulnerability before cybercriminals can exploit it. The Spring4Shell vulnerability enables remote code execution, and the Java applications impacted employ versions of 5.3.17 or 5.2.19 of the Spring framework and version 9 or higher of the Java Development Kit. All right, on Container Journal is an article about GitOps workflows and principles for Kubernetes. For many organizations, the process of scaling up and operationalizing their clusters has led to an increase in complexity, particularly when using Kubernetes. With frequent application and environment updates come challenges in maintaining configuration consistency. The result is often lost productivity, downtime, and even outages. So how are organizations managing this challenge when faced with growing complexity? For many, the answer is GitOps. But what is GitOps and how can you make it work for your organization? This article discusses the principles behind GitOps and offers up some best practices for using GitOps to simplify your container orchestration, particularly for Kubernetes. And we have the latest from managed services provider Ridge, which has partnered with cloud services provider HighVelocity to make available a bare metal platform for running cloud-native applications. The alliance will provide IT teams with access to a managed cloud-native platform based on Kubernetes at a much lower cost than rival hyperscaler providers of cloud services are able to provide. HighVelocity provides access to data centers in geographic regions where larger providers of cloud infrastructure services don't have a facility, and claims its bare metal cloud can reach 80% of the world's internet population in under 25 milliseconds. That's critical because in many instances, cloud-native applications are latency sensitive. Also, there are many countries that now require data created by cloud applications to be stored within their borders out of data sovereignty concerns. Ridge has created a managed service based on a single API through which it provides access to a curated distribution of Kubernetes that is integrated with an object-based storage system. Organizations can deploy that framework on any public cloud, local data center, or edge computing environment. All right, over on Security Boulevard, Cato Networks has added risk-based access controls to its managed secure access service edge platform, which makes it possible to automatically apply security policies in real time to any device that connects to the network and can limit access or the amount of bandwidth that might be allocated. This capability has been embedded within Cato's single pass cloud engine to provide more contextual awareness. Security teams can grant levels of access without having to completely disrupt an end user's experience. The goal is to strike a balance between the need for security and the productivity of the end user, which Cato achieves by continuously assessing the posture of any device attached to the network. Policies can be automatically applied based on identity, network, data use, or whenever a device falls out of compliance. And finally, we offer up a smart way to assess risk. Whenever a new software vulnerability hits the headlines, the tendency among cybersecurity pros, security analysts, and teams is to think the worst, that the bug could have an impact on their organizations and even lead to a breach or ransomware attack that impacts the company. And based on the current cybersecurity threat landscape, who can blame them? But not all vulnerabilities need to be treated with the same urgency. The fact is, not all vulnerabilities have the same impact. Some can be harmless, while others present a significant risk because of how and why they are exploited. Organizations need a way to identify the most serious software bugs before bad actors can take advantage of them. The key to successful vulnerability management is to prioritize those flaws that need to be fixed immediately while relegating less risky ones to the back burner. Validating the severity of the vulnerabilities and prioritizing which should be addressed first are key components of a smart vulnerability risk management strategy. To help with this, organizations need to apply some sort of risk and severity logic. This article looks at the steps involved in creating a smart vulnerability risk management strategy and how it can help organizations help their security teams work smarter, not harder. All right, that is it for the headlines. Please check back with me on Monday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechstrongTV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Horacio Zambrano, who is the Chief Marketing Officer over at Secret Double Octopus. Horacio, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today. Really do appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to be here.
I got to tell you, I have always loved the name of your company. I think it's just the funniest thing. And I'm wondering, before we get started, is there some sort of story around that company name that I don't know about?
There is a story. I'm not sure I can tell you. Well, I can't tell you because it's a complicated PhD level story. One of our founders is a female, Shimrit. I forget her last name. It's hard to pronounce, but she's from Tel Aviv. She was a doctorate student in computer science there and working on some algorithms around encryption. And so the original sort of premise of the company was around packet transmission across 2 different channels or 8 different channels and certain types of encryption. And so the 8 went to the octopus, I suppose, and then Secret Double Octopus because it was being transmitted twice. And it was related to VPN, but then eventually we morphed it into authentication. And so there's a story behind it. One of the things we do in our platform is secret sharing. So we are able to share information to a mobile device through 3 different channels so that it's actually quantum safe. It can't be encrypted. The odds of it being sort of man-in-the-middle attacked across all those channels and recomposed at the endpoint would be very difficult, almost impossible. So we do kind of, the secret sharing concept is known in academia, and that's sort of where it comes from.
Gotcha. Well, that's pretty nifty, and it sounds like nifty technology as well. But I want to talk to you today about passwordless authentication and maybe some of the confusion around it, and where you kind of see, passwordless authentication kind of living these days. So, tell me a little bit about what you are seeing in the authentication space in general, because I know multi-factor authentication and other different methods are increasingly being utilized in many organizations in light of all the cybersecurity attacks that are occurring. But I'm wondering if that's enough and whether passwordless authentication is part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the confusions is that some organizations think passwordless is less security because it's passwordless and they're so used to passwords. It is part of the MFA sort of umbrella. for the most part. It can be, there's magic links. There's certain ways you can implement passwordless, a smart card, which is not necessarily multi-factor. So smart card is something you have. But most of the solutions in the market today are multi-factor. It's something you are, and biometrics is used, and something you have, like a phone. And so I think that in general, there's confusion. The MFA explosion that sort of happened with the pandemic has actually helped passwordless. We've seen it in our pipelines, and I've been part of 2 companies over the last 3 years that are in this enterprise workforce passwordless authentication. And we've seen the pipelines grow and the interest grow continually. So the confusion, I think, is that people sometimes, if you look at all the surveys, over 50%, 60% say they're already doing passwordless. Well, that's the confusion. If you're doing Windows Hello for Business, which is a device-bound biometric, or Touch ID on a Mac, you're not necessarily typing in a password every time, but we call that a passwordless experience. And that's, if you reboot that machine, you as a user need to remember the password. So there's still that dependence on the end user remembering a password. So I think that when people answer the surveys, are you doing passwordless authentication, and those numbers come in really high, they're confusing things that might be passwordless experience that really still have a password underlying. And they may also be thinking, well, we're doing it for our consumers. And so they're mixing it. They're mixing different domains for it. And it seems like the surveys come back that there's a lot of optimism, but that already 60% of the enterprises are doing passwordless. And I still think that that's not the case. The kind of passwordless we talk about here is what we call full passwordless, for example.
Okay, so let's talk about full passwordless. Is it how different is it from that passwordless experience that you just referred to, such as using your fingertip or something like that?
So there is biometrics usually involved, so that frictionlessness is there. But the holy grail of passwordless is that the end user doesn't have to remember a password, set the password, reuse the password. That's where all the problems come. Mm-hmm. So to me, the holy grail of passwordless is if you can truly get to where an employee never has to remember a password in their day-to-day interactions with resources. So that may mean logging onto their workstation in the morning or multiple times throughout the day, accessing applications, if they're at home, VPN. So there's a number of use cases, and most analysts have documented what those use cases are. And so full passwordless to us would mean that you can really take the control away from the end user of having to pick a password or even remember it in some niche one corner use case. Mm-hmm. So it's not a splintered experience. It's splintered in the sense that, all my cloud apps go through an IDP, Okta, and those are all single signed on, and I can get on without a password. But then over here, a VPN, I have to remember a password. And so I think that is getting to the holy grail is really getting to that. And a passwordless experience generally doesn't get there. A passwordless experience will make a lot of those experiences, those use cases, not necessarily a typing password, but there will be moments where you will have to remember it. And because you're not using it as often, it may actually be worse for you, because now you really got to put it on a Post-it. So the holy grail, and that's the challenge for the industry. In fact, the number one challenge has been for all passwordless vendors, if you look at all surveys, that the number one obstruction to getting passwordless deployed is the legacy applications that cannot be federated through SAML or OIDC, and not being able to support those. That often will block an enterprise passwordless deployment. And
do you think we're getting better at it, though? I mean, do you think that APIs are coming out, or service overlays or something are coming out that will kind of enable that, even though it is legacy technology? Are we getting there?
Slowly. I mean, a lot of vendors will not go there. But the fact is, most companies are transferring their applications to more modern applications anyway, right? There are some that are going to stay there for a while, but it's getting better in the sense that it's either they're choosing to live with a couple of apps that they're going to leave sort of in a legacy state on premise. But as the lift and shift trend happens, more of these applications are traded out for more modern architectures. In our case, we're doing password rotations. Sort of like what you do with the CyberArk for a privileged access manager, whereas most of the passwordless vendors today build their infrastructure on a FIDO certificate, which is a PKI certificate infrastructure. Right. So when you do password rotations, we're able to actually support a legacy on-premise app, because we can, through that secret sharing, inject an application into that on-premise legacy app. but we also support FIDO, but only for the use of the FIDO key, not as an underlying architecture that some of the other vendors are doing.
I wonder if we're seeing a more uptake in cybersecurity in general, especially over the last couple of years, because workplaces have shifted, and even the ways organizations approach working has shifted. It seems like there's been a greater emphasis put on cybersecurity, and I don't know. Well, I have a feeling it's because we've seen a whole lot of cyber events occur, and either just because cybersecurity or cyber attacks have gotten that much better, or because there's been kind of a lax in cybersecurity technologies and practices over the course of the pandemic, when organizations just wanted to get their employees home and working, and we're kind of seeing the issues from that. So do you think we're getting better as far as just an awareness of cybersecurity is concerned?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there was, like you said, that first phase was business continuity, keep the lights on. But then, and that we saw that push to VPN, remote access, and that's where the MFA was one of the best practices that we saw that surge. Then it sort of evened out, and people started to think more rationally. And now, zero trust has been out there for a while, but I think people are really thinking about zero trust network access and architecting their workplaces amidst these changes that are going to be kind of the new normal. Zero trust is being out there. And I think for MFA, the most large enterprises have deployed basic MFA. Some of them are looking at passwordless, particularly, but they're also looking at adaptive MFA in this new architecture they're designing. And so to me, the big question is adaptive MFA is really this idea of frictionlessness and a step up in certain cases, depending on the access, depending on what you're trying to get to. And I think passwordless, we already start at that sort of higher level, and you can still get frictionless. So to me, adaptive MFA and passwordless, which are at around the same price point in the market, it's kind of like the thing I think is going to be kind of the decision point over the next few years. But I do think cybersecurity has become more visible and more aware at the board level, particularly because of Colonial Pipeline and the ransomware attacks that actually stopped operations, not just a data leak. So it didn't seem like the very expensive data breaches were doing it, but when you have people lining up, that became a much more relevant present thing for people. And we know that phishing and ransomware have taken off. So the hacker themselves are doing more attacks in the pandemic as well.
Yeah, it's really amazing. All it takes is for something to kind of hit you in the pocketbook, basically, and then all of a sudden, you are so much more aware of it. When it gets personal, then you're going to do something about it. So where are we today with respect to kind of passwordless authentication and just even MFA? Do you think that we are where we should be from a technology and an adoption standpoint, or do you think we still have ways to go?
I think we're still very nascent because I know that a lot of our customers it's the typical thing. The enterprise customers don't want to talk about what they're using. They don't want to expose themselves to the bad guys. So that's one of the things I don't see happening a lot in the industry for passwordless, that you have a lot of evangelization. And MFA is sort of just almost commoditized. There's so many providers, and the price points have come down so much. You can get MFA from your single sign-on providers as well who offer it. And so MFA is everywhere, and in some ways, but what it is it's not used universally. So this idea of full passwordless that I was talking about, even a full MFA, you have, I think the Forrester latest survey said 46% of applications have MFA. So half of them don't. And so you may have your VPN may have it or may not. So it's not used uniformly. And now this question of, do we go for an adaptive MFA? Well, that's something that larger enterprises are doing. And so I think we're still nascent, and I think that we're seeing the growth in our business, but it seems like it should be further along. The analysts, I remember Gartner made a statement in 2017 that by 2022, 90% of I think it was 90% of large enterprises would have passwordless in place, and 60% of mid-size. Well, we're here now, and even though the surveys say that, again, there was all that confusion, I think that in terms of what real full passwordless, how many people really aren't using a password to get into any systems, I think we're far from that. So again, these things like passwordless experiences, the Windows Hello for Business, they've helped push us that way. But it's not the final story. Yeah, in terms of where we need to be.
Yeah, well, hopefully things will get better in the next 12 months or so, and I do believe that as we see an increase in attacks, the more organizations will adopt, at least multi-factor authentication. Passwordless authentication would be awesome. So we'll just have to see how things go, especially as they kind of move forward in their digital transformation. Hopefully cybersecurity will be a larger part of the conversation, and passwordless authentication will be a good part of that as well. So, Horacio, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me about this. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure it's one that we're bound to have at least one more time before we get it all sorted out.
Okay, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Charlene.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you we've got so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Well, I got 3 here that prove how awesome they are, so hopefully you can mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Getting Started with Reliability Management. This one is happening Tuesday, April 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by Sumo Logic, partnered with AWS. Keeping modern, complex, and continuously changing applications running is not easy. Most IT organizations operate by going from one fire drill to the next. Reliability management helps shift teams from a reactive to a proactive stance to provide a fantastic digital experience and mitigate service disruptions. So this webinar will cover how service level agreements and error budgets align your organization, how to get started with reliability management, and some organizational best practices and patterns that need success. Interesting one there. All right, the next one is called GitHub Actions and Code Injection, Avoiding Vulnerable Configurations. This one is happening Wednesday, April 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by SciCode. GitHub Actions is an increasingly popular DevOps tool because of its rich marketplace and ease of use. As part of SciCode's research into the GitHub Actions security landscape, they discovered several pitfalls in the workflow that could result in some severe security consequences. Unless developers deeply understand GitHub best practices, these workflows are likely to have mistakes that are costly and could create supply chain risks to the application. So this webinar will discuss how SciCode found and disclosed vulnerable workflows in several popular open source tools, delve into GitHub Actions architecture to understand the possible consequences of vulnerabilities, and present some possible mitigations for these issues. Another good one. All right, the third and final webinar I want to let you know about today is called the Road to Reliability. This one is happening Thursday, April 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Gremlin. Over the years, a lot of research has been conducted and many books have been written on improving the resilience of our software. This talk will dive deep into 3 key practices identified by Gene Kim, Jez Humble, and Nicole Forsgren, who are the authors of Accelerate the Science of Lean Software and DevOps. So this webinar will discuss the key measures of tempo and stability and how practicing chaos engineering will increase both. Good stuff there as well. So lots of key takeaways in that one. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. I'll be back on Monday with a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. Please, whatever you do, stay safe. All right, we are back. Next up, Mitch Ashley is here, and he's got an interview with Ben Solomon, who is the product manager over at a company called Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a new API gateway product, and Mitch and Ben talk about its many features and its potential impact on application security. Great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Oh, I have a great pleasure of being joined by Ben Solomon. Ben is product manager with Cloudflare. Ben, good to be talking with you.
Hey, Mitch. I'm so excited to chat. We got a lot to go over today, so I can't wait.
I am too. I happen to know a little bit about Cloudflare myself, so I'm excited to hear about what we're going to discuss. But let's first have you introduce yourself for folks that don't know who Cloudflare is. Tell us about Cloudflare.
Sure. So a little background on me first. My name is Ben. I'm a product manager at Cloudflare. For the past 2 years or so, I've looked after our bot management product, which is largely about detecting bots on the web for our customers. And then as soon as those bots show up to our customers' websites, we try to block them or mitigate them in some way. And so that's a lot of where my background is. Recently, I've pivoted into the API space. So I'm helping Cloudflare launch a new API security and API gateway product. That's what occupies most of my time these days. Cloudflare as a company launches all sorts of different products to help protect websites and different internet applications. If I tried to tell you about all of them today, I would run out of time. And it's also a challenge because increasingly there are more and more of these. But the basic tenets for us are we want to make sure your website is more secure, more performant, and then more reliable. And so we just got a bunch of different things in the space, which started off as CDN and is now expanded really everywhere to help with websites.
Yeah, a lot of CDN, a lot of security features, management features. Yeah, definitely check out Cloudflare if you haven't already. Well, let's talk about API gateway. APIs and API security are a huge topic. A lot of startup companies emerged in this space. A lot of existing security companies have expanded into not only APIs, but security around APIs. Tell us about API gateway and what that means, what you've launched.
Yeah. So the thing we've noticed, and keep in mind, customers have been using Cloudflare for non-API traffic for years now. The thing we've noticed is our customers more and more are running into API traffic. They're starting to manage it. It's starting to drive a lot of their services. And it's particularly propelled by IoT devices, right? By mobile apps, these things that are using software to software communication. And so there is this really large need in the market for an API gateway now, which is kind of like a hub for managing your APIs. It's a one-stop shop for everything you would need. It's securing that API traffic. It's helping to kind of manage and monitor, so provide analytics and alerting and all that stuff, and really do everything else in one place. And so what Cloudflare is doing and what we announced just a couple of weeks ago is we're launching our own API gateway. And so it is a one-stop shop, again, within the Cloudflare dashboard, where you can show up and say, I'm going to configure this set of security tools for my endpoints. I'm going to manage them in this way. I'm going to set up authentication and do all that. It all lives within the Cloudflare dashboard. And so what we're trying to do is make it easier for folks who already use Cloudflare to port their existing third-party gateway functionality over into our dashboard, lower latency, and do all that.
Great. Let's explore that a little bit more. So there's the group of developers building apps and APIs that they use, maybe API-centric applications that can make use of an API gateway. There's also infinite number of integrations and plugins and, all kinds of apps and services that could be part of a web infrastructure, kind of that ecosystem. Is the API gateway sort of, you're looking to be the gateway between, let's say a WordPress engine of some type or a plugin and a third-party service that might do analytics? Is it that kind of an API gateway, or is it more integrating to your services as Cloudflare?
So it can actually plug in a lot of different ways. And so the way I like to think about this is, traditionally, folks who have had APIs are using those APIs and Cloudflare in a certain way. Someone makes a request, maybe it's from my phone, right? And my phone will make that request. It first shows up at Cloudflare because Cloudflare is often the CDN. And so when that request shows up, there's some sort of logic there that says, you know what, this needs to be routed somewhere because it's an API request. And so it's passed then from Cloudflare to a third-party gateway of some sort, which then may pass it on to an origin, right? And so the way this is really used is we're just getting rid of that third-party gateway. Okay. You can kind of configure it how you want with whatever service you're using today.
Excellent. So I would imagine with your global distribution, content distribution network, that's also part of this API infrastructure. Can you do some things to customize if I'm, in Turkey, Istanbul, that part of the world, I might do something one way in terms of an API gateway versus South America or Europe or something like that?
Sure. The really nice thing is this runs at our edge. And so if you think about it, it's well over 200 different data centers around the world now. And that means that if I am in any of those places you just mentioned, if I'm in Turkey, right, that request doesn't have to get processed at a gateway that's located in Southern California, right? It can be processed within Turkey. And that has a lot of latency benefits. It also means you can customize things and you can set them up, just like you said, whether that's to deal with privacy regulations or anything else.
Mm-hmm. What are some important security features around an API gateway you think customers need, must-haves?
So I can give you some that are kind of paramount for us. They're the ones that we've launched with. The first one is just this ability to do schema validation. And so if you think about the way APIs are set up today, most developers will have something that's called a schema. It's open API format, commonly known as a Swagger file. And so you can think of this schema as like a catalog of all your APIs. So if I know I have 100 different endpoints, the schema lists out those different endpoints for me. It says this is exactly how those endpoints should look in terms of the headers they show up with, the cookies, and all of that stuff. And you can actually bring that schema to Cloudflare now. You can just upload it in our dashboard, and then we will validate traffic as it comes in against the schema. And when I first heard about schema validation, my thought was, this shouldn't really matter, right? Any attacker is going to immediately figure out what a schema looks like. They'll just match the traffic, and schema validation won't do much. In reality, that's actually not the case. A lot of folks don't necessarily have access to the schema that a company is using. And so they have to kind of guess exactly what's going to match. That can be hard if there are a lot of headers. The other issue that comes up is a lot of attackers just don't think about this. They don't think about matching a schema, or they aren't aware that that's the security policy in place. Mm-hmm. So that's one example for you, schema validation, which we, again, run at our edge everywhere. I can give you some other examples. We've recently launched, this one's really interesting, abuse detection feature. And so the idea is, if someone makes a request to Cloudflare and therefore to your APIs, we can actually watch sort of what a typical user does in terms of the number of requests they make to a certain endpoint. So maybe we expect folks to attempt to log in at most 3 times. And we notice that with our ML engine. We can then suggest a rate limiting threshold that's somewhere above that, but below the threshold of abuse for our customers to implement. So if we think your average user is trying to log in 3 times, but we notice there's this other cluster of folks who are trying to log in like 1,000 times, we can suggest a rate limit that's in between those and help you implement it. And so that's the idea behind abuse detection as well. Those are 2 examples. There's lots of different things.
Do that at the gateway rather than at the authentication engine, whatever you're using to do that.
Right. And it's a lot faster that way too.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Discovery is also oftentimes something people talk about, sort of overlapping a little bit of API management and also API gateways. Like, what am I using? What are all parts of this application? It sounds like, though, if you're uploading a Swagger file, are you limited to what's in the Swagger definition, or can you hook in other things that aren't part of that Swagger? Well, how does that work?
That's a great question. This is really part of our vision for how APIs are going to be managed long term. It shouldn't be that you're limited to that Swagger file. And in fact, most of the files that are given to us are rather incomplete, and it's no one's fault. It's just the nature of creating hundreds of thousands.
Fast, right? As soon as you update it, it's out of date.
This is the problem, right? You're changing them constantly. You may have other teams that are spinning up new APIs that you've never even heard of or aren't aware of. And so if you just validate against that schema, you're going to have some issues because it's not enough. And so we actually envision this world where you're giving us the schema and we're also running API discovery at the same time. And so we're saying, great, we'll validate all these endpoints you told us about, but here are another 50, 100 endpoints that we found. Do you want to do something about those? Because we can also implement policies for those. And so it's actually these two things working in tandem that probably completes the API security ecosystem there.
Okay, good. Well, we'll look forward to some things from that. How does the API gateway fit into the not necessarily the pricing, the cost itself, but the different tier of service that you offer? Is it an add-on to the paid tier? Is it only in the enterprise tier? What do we have to do to be able to use the API gateway?
Sure. So one of the things you'll notice about Cloudflare, and look, we did this with our bot management product when I was working on that, is we try to offer something for everyone, regardless of what the size of your site is or how many resources you have or anything like that. And so for folks who aren't as familiar with Cloudflare, we of course have these kind of self-serve plans, which are free, pro, and business. Those typically just have a monthly fee or they're completely free. And then we have these enterprise contracts, which are for larger companies. API Gateway today and API Shield, which is the subset of it that's already available, those are ready as add-ons for enterprise plans. And so you can add them onto your plan just like you would with bot management. With that said, and I won't go into details yet, but we are not stopping there. And so for folks who want some sort of set of API tools, we're going to pull this in your direction. I'll also say that some of the features like mutual TLS, we're already offering for free for all of our customers. So there are definitely opportunities to use this if you're not enterprise or don't want to add it on. Okay.
Yeah, makes sense. There may be some features that kind of will fall under an API gateway kind of service that are already there. Okay. So we'll look forward for more around that. You mentioned my favorite and my hated word, bots. Anyone in this business, it's the bane of our world, right? And that's obviously a lot of what Cloudflare does, and taking a lot of that burden off of network and infrastructure and security engineers. What's happening today? What's changed in the nature of bots and the things that we're dealing with in the last 30 to 60 days that's relatively new? Is it just more volume because of Ukraine and Russia? Is it obviously traffic from, of course, it doesn't have to be from those two locations, or is it nature of how bots and what they're doing has changed?
I fundamentally believe that the change of bots is often observed over longer periods of time. And so for me to say last 30 to 60 days, I think we'll figure out a few months from now what it was when we can kind of look back and reflect. Certainly over the last half year or so, bots have gotten way, way more sophisticated. I mean, just to the point where in a lot of cases, the choices we're having to make is not, do we want to detect a bot or a human here? But the bot is starting to look exactly like a human. And so do we want to put in policies which may catch these new bots, but may also start to catch legitimate humans who just happen to have similar behaviors? And so in the context of API security, this presents a whole nother challenge, which is before, with bot management, our job was to say, this request looks like it's coming from a bot. This one looks like it's coming from a human. You can't do that with APIs because bots are just automated traffic and APIs are inherently automated, right? And so the way we are trying to adapt or to deal with some of these more nuanced threats is to say, rather than something automated or human, can we look at its behavior and try to identify the quality of that? Is it malicious? Is it good? And that's the way we are almost performing bot management for APIs, which I think is kind of the next frontier here.
It's interesting. It seemed that I agree with your assessment. You know better than I. You're living with it more closely, but yeah, it's sort of the stupid bot era, right? Where it's trying all kinds of things, and it's somewhat guided, but eventually that information falls into a human to say, okay, now here's how we're going to leverage that, and either manually human or more automation to go after it. And the ability to masquerade and look like an authentic human doing the bot traffic has really shifted greatly. Why is it shifted? Is it better AI and ML to be able to do that? Is it just more sophisticated bot scripting? Is it just attackers' better knowledge of how to mimic what a user does?
Look, I think it's just this constant stepping ladder where the bot started X number of years ago trying to attack sites, and the barrier to entry was very low. I mean, a couple curl requests, whatever, and that would sort of get you in the game. And then someone fired back and created a security tool which was slightly better. And then the bots got a little bit better. And we've just been notching higher and higher here. And it feels like we might be reaching some sort of plateau eventually where there's just nowhere else to go here, right? Where the bots can only get so sophisticated. One of the things we love to do is kind of monitor the hacker news feeds and what folks are saying on Twitter. And we actually look at the most prominent bot operators who are trying to basically evade Cloudflare's detections. It's one of the ways we learn. And we've seen a lot of frustration lately where folks are saying, look, maybe I could get around CAPTCHAs or any other form of deterrent that Cloudflare has in place. But it's almost not worth it anymore. It's so much effort and it's so costly to run bots that are doing these things that we hope we can make them jump ship altogether, right? That this is just no longer something they want to do. And I'll give you one more example. We have a tar pitting challenge, which basically will respond to bots by unloading a massive file, right? And causing them to be preoccupied for over a minute in some cases. And that will run up the server bill of those bots. And so in a lot of cases, it's not just an effort thing. It's a financial cost that's associated with running these bots. And look, they keep getting more sophisticated. They can keep getting into some systems, but eventually something's going to happen and we'll see what gives. Interesting. Consequences for the bot, not just to the bots. Yeah. We care about, it's not just about blocking them, right? It's about actually taking them down. Our tool for this is literally called bot fight mode because we are fighting back. We don't just want to see them kind of stopped. Mm-hmm. Great. I'm curious. So I don't mean to throw you to you from left field. So if it's not a fair question, that's okay. I live in the DevOps world a lot, where infrastructure is all software, and now the configuration infrastructure is code. It's being dynamically created. Has that impacted Cloudflare's business to be able to automate more things of configuration and what's happening inside of that? Is that still kind of yet to come? We haven't quite gotten to that place with infrastructure being more dynamic in that way. Look, I'll say this. I work within a specific kind of niche area at Cloudflare, so bots and API security. I may not be the best person to comment on this, but I can say that a lot of what Cloudflare is positioned to do is to work with infrastructure as code, right? A lot of our integrations that exist are like that. Cloudflare is a more recent company. I mean, we were founded a little over 10 years ago, but really have hit our stride these last few years in terms of when we've been innovating. And so I think the fact that we are so cloud-based and also have a really distributed network is going to set us up to work well in those cases. When we build products like API Gateway, we are thinking about how we can have Terraform support and all these other things that are going to help us move forward there. So we are very, very focused on it, but there are probably other folks at Cloudflare who know even more than I do about it. Okay. Well, thanks for taking a stab at it. I know it's not your area of focus, and I don't ask you questions, or I try not to. No, always happy to give it a shot. Well, good. Where can folks find out more about API Gateway and maybe connect with you if they have an enterprise account, or keep up with when that might be available to other folks? Sure. So my favorite place to point folks is always the Cloudflare blog. There's so much content on there, and the Cloudflare API Gateway was actually announced during Security Week for us, which was 2 weeks ago. We announced different things every single day of that week. And so if you want to read about the Cloudflare API Gateway or anything else we announced during Security Week, blog.cloudflare.com is your place to go. If you're already an existing Cloudflare customer, then reach out to your account team and we'll get you set up with the gateway. One clarification I should make is what we've announced here is, first of all, the security features within our gateway are all totally ready today. So you can sign up for that. You can use it. We are growing those security features into a full gateway throughout this year. And so if there are portions of that gateway you want to try, whether they're the authentication pieces or the management and monitoring, including like one-click workers to actually spin up your own workers microservices at our edge, let us know, and we can get you one of the early accesses for all those different things. But blog and reach out to your account team. Those are the best.
Okay. Very good. And I agree. The blog's great. A lot of good information. Finding it's a great place to keep up with what's happening. So instead of reading press releases and all that kind of boring stuff. So anyway, well, Ben Solomon, great to have you. Really appreciate you coming on. I hope you'll keep us updated as things progress, and love to hear more about the API gateway and expanded feature set, security and beyond as that happens.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Always love talking about bots and APIs and all that good stuff.
You bet. Thanks again.
Bye.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Rounding out today's TechstrongTV broadcast, we've got The View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Software.com CTO Mason McLeod, and they discuss why most developers actually don't spend all that much time actually writing code, because they are so inundated with other tasks that they have to do during the day. It is a great conversation and a lot of takeaways in this one, so you definitely want to check it out. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mason McLeod, who's the CTO for software, and they have a new report out that says that developers don't spend a whole lot of time actually coding, which means they must be doing something else. Mason, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
So what exactly do you think developers are spending their time on, given the amount of time they spend coding is surprisingly low? Maybe you want to get into that detail in the report, but it seems to me maybe they're asking them to do a lot of things that have nothing to do with coding.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, right? So a report came out and we found we've had over 275,000 users that we've been able to analyze coding behaviors of. And it shows that developers on the median code less than an hour a day. So it's about 52 minutes. And, in the grand total of a Monday through Friday, it's 4 hours and 21 minutes. It's less than 5 hours. So it is a pretty small percentage of the time that they're actually at work. And also our data shows that the time that developers spend from beginning of the day to the end of the day is pretty long, and it's getting longer. So it's not like there's not time in the day that's being given to work for this. As any software developer knows that's been in the industry, it's a hard job. There's a lot of hours in it. So why is it 52 minutes a day versus 4 hours, 6 hours that I'm sure some people would like to do? And I think there's a couple things there. We're definitely asking software engineers to do a lot of other things that isn't just coding. And there's a lot to the job as well that isn't just, typing. But the proportions that we're seeing here are obviously pointing to something being amiss in the balance of their day. And there's plenty of conversations and data around meetings that software developers have to go to, how many they have. There's a lot of talk about interruptive communication platforms, whichever one you happen to be using. One probably jumps to mind whenever I say that, pulling people out of their coding sessions. And if you're in the office, it's the traditional tap on the shoulder, hey, what's going on? Did you see the email that I just sent you? That sort of stuff is extremely disruptive to the deep focus and the deep work that software developers do. And there's a lot of switching costs whenever you go between those different activities. And that's kind of the body of of knowledge and the kind of widespread sort of talk about what is interrupting developers from being able to actually develop. And it's interesting to see it actually come out in numbers in our report. And I think that's the biggest finding, is being able to see, like, what is the actual number?
Right. And developers are like regular people. They have football pools to keep track of, and they got to go to Starbucks. So, you got to factor in that kind of stuff as well. But it seems to me, at least, that developers that I talk to spend an inordinate amount of time managing the actual build process. And in this age of DevOps, you think that might not be such heavy lifting. And why is it still an issue?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time spent on making sure that the development process runs, like after you write your code and you do all that stuff. And it's interesting that, DevOps offers all this automation, and in a way, it also puts more responsibility on the individual developer. They have better tools for it, but now you've got to manage your build pipeline, you've got to manage your deployments, you've got to manage your Kubernetes pods or whatever it is, because it's all in your code now. So it's way easier to do, but there's more to do than just writing the features and writing the tests around them. So I think that there's more there, and there's definitely more work that automation can do. And what we're seeing is that among people that do have better automation tools and more build pipelines and things like that, that their lead time tends to be better from starting a piece of work to delivering it. So I think that general direction is very valid, that it will save you time once you get to that automation. So I think there's this mix of, they're in the DevOps world where there's more work to be done by the developer that takes more time to manage the rest of it, rather than kind of tossing it over the fence to IT or something like that back in the old days that we used to do. But we're still in this middle ground of, it's not really fully automated yet. All the tools aren't quite there yet. Not that the tools don't exist, but they're not integrated in the systems, in the teams, the way that they could be to save all of that time.
Do you think this is going to be a bigger issue going into 2022? Because when I talk to people, there's a lot more of these digital business projects in the pipeline, and the expectation is that more applications are going to be coming through, and that puts a lot more focus on developer productivity, right?
It does. Well, I think that if we've got more measures and more eyes on developer productivity in a way that is designed to protect and promote developer productivity, not just to have the morale improve, or the meetings will stop when the morale improves, like that sort of approach to it, that's not really going to help. So if we look at it from a very supportive point of view, and we see things like this where if we look at days of week, we see that Wednesday is the highest coding day. So it goes to a top of 55 minutes on the median. So we're seeing a peak there. So I think the question really there is, okay, well, what's different about Wednesdays? A lot of companies, as of recent, have adopted no meeting Wednesdays, and other things that move a lot of the overhead away from particular times. And we're seeing it in the data actually pay dividends. So those sorts of things about being able to measure what's going on, be able to make proactive decisions in order to protect that most valuable time that a developer has, we see it start to pay off right here.
Do you think as we go along, there seems to be some tension, and it's always been there, between thinking about software development as a process, almost like a factory process that you can automate, and the whole notion of software development as art? And that tension kind of creates this push me pull kind of feel among developers. So even if I'm not writing code, how much time might I be thinking about the act of writing the code before I actually type the code? And do we allow time for that?
Yeah. So that's a very good point. That the way that I see it, it's kind of a balance between the two. Whenever you're as a software developer, whenever you're diving into a problem, you're figuring out a solution, you're experimenting with different ways to either solve it or optimize it or whatever it is that you're doing, there is a lot of what would appear from the outside to be sort of like downtime or dead time, where you're thinking, you're typing a little bit, you're erasing it, you're trying something else, you're running a test, you're erasing it. And that's the art part of it, or, you know, the creative side of that. And now the part where I think that the factory or the logistics kind of metaphor starts to work is when you've done that, you've created your solution, and how does it get from your computer to the end customer? And we call it, you know, shipping product. Obviously, we're not actually physically moving anything, but it's very logistical at that point. So when you look at the DevOps flow, the automation flows, that can be measured very much in a sort of logistical factory value stream mapping sort of way, where you can see what's the lead time to go to each step? Why is this one taking longer than the rest of them? Cutting down lead time to get to that, you know, theoretical best time possible to go from end of developer being done creating their art to it being in the hands of the consumer. And so I think that has two really big benefits. One, of course, the consumer gets it faster. You're going to be able to iterate faster. So it is, as like a mechanics and a business side of things, it's obviously better. But also from a developer's point of view, the most frustrating thing that you can do as a developer is create something or solve something that was a huge amount of effort, and it goes nowhere because of bureaucracy or process or whatever that is just stopping and frustrating the entire pipeline. So being able to optimize that delivery pipeline is a huge benefit to the business and to the developers, which, you know, if you're frustrated at work, development is, you know, one of the best industries out there for the individual to have a wide array of options. So if you create a frustrating environment for your software developers, they may not stay there that long.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's also maybe a danger of becoming a slave to the metrics, and a lot of organizations optimize for the metrics, and it winds up creating something of a fear culture versus using the metrics to educate and kind of encourage people? So do you really need to think through how you're going to use those metrics?
Yeah, I mean, that is very much something that we think about a lot whenever we put these together. So you can see in our code time report that there's nothing individual. There's no stack ranks of, you know, even different types of coders or anything like that. So we, even in our global reports that are, you know, spread across hundreds of thousands of users, we're staying away from individual stack ranks and things like that. And that's very much how we think about these metrics. You know, in some ways, it's pretty easy to go into an API and like pull counts of things and say, this person did this count and this person did that count of that action or whatever. And like you make your stack rank. I think that it's a pretty dangerous thing to do from a, you know, as you said, as like a kind of a safety sort of view. And like if you incorrectly or sort of naively pull in these metrics and it creates a culture of fear because you don't want to be at the bottom of the stack rank of whatever metric someone pulled out, then, you know, that's a real problem. So, you know, what we tend to look at are compound metrics that take into account a lot of different factors so that you can't game just one and try to just optimize for one thing at the detriment of everything else. So I think it's a combination of making sure that you've got the right sort of sophistication and nuance around how you build those metrics and which ones you put up. Because as soon as you put up a metric, whether or not someone thinks about it, it's going to be optimized for, or it's going to affect behavior in some way. And that's just the human nature. So being careful about which metrics you put up, making sure that they're compound enough that they have balancing factors to them, and staying away from individual performance reports being part of these. Because as I was saying, like the DevOps side of it, the process of getting code out to the end user, that is very, especially in DevOps, very formulaic, very automated. You can measure that and you can say this pipeline works better than that pipeline. And that doesn't include like people's names and reputations in that. That's the pipeline. How is it working? When you're talking about, crafting code and solutions and things like that, that doesn't lend itself as well to that metaphor, and it doesn't lend itself as well to those kinds of metrics. So you've got to do something else for that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think as we go along that people are measuring the right thing? Because the business cares about the quality of the application and they care about the outcome. And so often when I talk to people in DevOps, they may still be measuring something as archaic as lines of code to, things that are listed as throughput on a DORA report, but don't translate into anything that the business understands. So what should we be measuring?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that all of these metrics that are coming out of your delivery pipeline, how quickly you can get changes to production, how often you get changes to production, if you put them in the same pool as the other business metrics that your company has, and you correlate them to your, your customer satisfaction survey results, you hook them to obviously your revenue growth and things like that. The correlations between them is going to be incredibly important. And I think that if we start using these metrics, these really like high level composite metrics in the same way that we use those other business metrics, we're going to be able to see the impact of it. And it's going to be able to be balanced by, okay, if we went this fast, our quality started to go down based on our customer satisfaction results, or our downtime went up. We were moving too fast. So there is a thing of like too much on the scale is not good. Too little. So like there's a happy medium, probably like a high medium area that you want to be on these scales of these metrics that provide the best results with the least amount of downside of just being in the Wild West and just shooting stuff to production without any safeguards.
All right, everybody. It's just as important to figure out what to measure as it is to measure it, and be careful what you ask for. Hey, Mason, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it talking to you.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, that wraps up today's TechStrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's conversations. We always have a good time talking with folks here at TechStrong TV. Just a quick reminder before we shut things down, we've got a lot of events coming up, both virtual and in person. I hope you can join us for some of them. I'm not going to list them all here, but I do encourage you to go to TechstrongEvents.com and check out our entire lineup of events. We've got them all listed there, and you can click on each event, check out the agenda, check out the speaker lineup, and register for them. And hopefully we'll see you at one or more of the events. That is it for today's TechStrong TV. I will be back on Monday with a brand new episode for your viewing pleasure. And until then, I hope you have a great weekend. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.